But that's where the money is. That's where they're going to have to go. But they're not willing to tax the rich at a higher rate. That's where the money is. And you've got to tighten it from both sides. It's the same problem we have in the state. You know, we've had 3 years of declining money coming to schools. Even with the stimulus money that they poured in, the state just sucked that money off the side and the unit value actually went down. We haven't had a raise in 3 years. We've got less teachers teaching more kids. And it's real hard.
Let's talk about that then. President Obama said last week that the same thing, that the only way out of this is to raise revenues, that is to tax the rich more. He said we should tax the millionaires and billionaires more. I went on the TV that night, so you can hear the same thing that I'm about to tell you on YouTube, and you can like it or dislike it, but it's an economic truth. What happens when we tax the rich? Let's just break it down by individual, and then we'll look at corporations. Well, let's talk corporations first, because the first one that people say that we always should tax is Exxon. Exxon makes 30 or 40 billion a year. I don't know exactly what. But I have been in the oil field my whole life, and what Exxon, what Shell, what all those companies do is they make the profits this year, and they turn around and invest 80% of them, 90% of them in drilling for next year. So let's say that we tax the entire amount of revenue away from, or the profits, away from Exxon. Then that means next year there's going to be no drilling, no fracking, no stimulation, no well service, no anything. So you're going, when you tax the rich, when you raise taxes, there's a basic truth that tax increases kill jobs, tax decreases create jobs, and this is how it does it. So when you kill all of those jobs, then this incrementally is going to get smaller. And so you will have made a little bit of money taxing Exxon, but you're going to lose all those jobs out here, and this money gets smaller. But as you kill those jobs, those people then go on unemployment, welfare, and food stamps, and so you drive your cost up, and you drive your revenues down, so actually you get your margin much wider. That's what California is doing. They have added so much taxes to the rich that companies are moving out of state. They're moving into this state, other states, and so the people who are left don't have jobs. They go into unemployment, food stamps, welfare, and so the cost of California's government is skyrocketing. Meanwhile, their revenues are decreasing. But that's a corporate view. Let's let's tax the wealthy individuals. So then I look at Bill Sweat over in our TV. I don't know if he's wealthy or not, but he has a company there, and I assume he makes more than $250,000 a year. So I was asking Bill Sweat about a year ago, what does it take to create a job? So we're talking about job growth or job decreases, right? In other words, we want to increase the revenue to the government. We're going to tax Bill Sweat because he's a millionaire, I would suspect. And so we tax him. So I say to Mr. Sweat, when do you create a job? What does it take for you to create a job? And he's an example of every one of us. I was in an oil and gas business, the service business. So he said it's taken $340,000 for me to create one job. He said, I run bulldozers, and so I have to go buy a bulldozer to hire one more guy. And he said, actually I have to have a pickup truck too, because they don't let me drive the bulldozer down the main streets of Artesia. So it's a pickup truck for $60,000. So basically $400,000. Now you tax that money away from Mr. Sweat, and so you don't have that job creation. That's exactly the situation that we have in the country right now. You have stagnation in the job creating sectors, and you hear Mr. Obama say, but you all have lots of money, why don't you do this? Why don't you create the jobs? Well, they don't create jobs because they're uncertain of what the future is. They've seen regulation, taxation being suggested, and so they say, well, we have to pay our taxes first. We're going to just slow down the job creation. We're going to sit here, we're going to hunker down, and we're going to hold up. And that's the reason that our economy hasn't created. So actually, when you raise taxes, you depress the revenue to the government even further. So what Mr. Obama says it himself. He said in his State of the Union, we're taxing our corporations too high. We're the highest in the world, and we need to lower that. That's what he said in his State of the Union. I was sitting beside Charlie Rangel, and even Charlie was saying, okay, that's normally a Republican point of view, and yet Mr. Obama said it because he understands. Let's look at one more example when we're trying to go into this in depth, because I think people often believe it's that simple. Just raise taxes and this is going to go up. So the example that I use is Ireland. About 15 years ago, they had a tax rate exactly like the U.S., about 36%. Ireland lowered the tax rate for corporations down to 12%. Corporations began to flock into Ireland, created the Irish miracle. They flocked into there and created jobs, and then Ireland did this. They began to create a welfare state that was second to none. In order to support it, they began to raise taxes. So 15 years ago, my brother-in-law worked for Hughes Tool. He went over and helped build the first manufacturing facility for Hughes Tool in Ireland because the tax rates went down. Now then, Ireland is raising their tax rates up. And so which countries are in the process of failing over in Europe? Ireland, Greece, whatever. So my brother-in-law, who went 15 years ago to put the first bit manufacturing facility there, went this year and they tore down the last manufacturing facility and they brought all the equipment home because tax increases have killed the jobs in Ireland. That's exactly what's going on. So what we need to do is get our government spending in control, and you cannot get it. I agree with that piece of what you said. You can't lower 3.5 to 2. The way you get this to grow is not by taxing more, but by taxing correctly. And we're taxing almost triple what other nations are taxing, so companies go over there. And the second thing we do is kill jobs through regulation. We're killing our jobs through regulation. We're exporting jobs through regulation. The spotted owl, for instance. I introduced a bill this year saying I want to keep the spotted owl alive, but it should not have killed the timber industry. The spotted owl by itself killed 20,000 jobs in New Mexico in the timber industry. They're not here anymore. Cloudcroft used to have a thriving timber business. It's not here. When we put those people out of work, this number got smaller and this number got bigger. We've been doing that for decades. Just about a year and a half ago, we put 27,000 farmers out of work in the San Joaquin Valley. Another regulation, 2-inch minnow. Now I believe the minnow should be kept alive, but it can be kept alive in holding ponds next to the river, put in the river when we need them, and we could have kept those 27,000 jobs. But instead, the 27,000 people who used to be growing crops, and by the way, we got 80% of the country's vegetables from the San Joaquin Valley, 80% of what you got on the shelf came from there. Today, we're getting those vegetables from Mexico, Central America, and South America. They spray pesticides that are not legal for us. So I just visited the border about January, went down there, and they said the biggest threat they have is stuff coming into the country sprayed with things that are dangerous for people. So we made our food supply less. We put 27,000 people from paying taxes. We made this number smaller. We are now paying them welfare, unemployment, and food stamps, and this number gets bigger. So as we kill jobs through regulation, this number gets wider. If we'll have some common sense balance in regulation, we begin to create jobs, that's where you get the real increase in this bottom figure here. Creation of jobs is the only solution that's going to cure this problem. You got a question? Yeah, come ahead.
Yeah, it's Congressman. Free enterprise. Wouldn't the economy grow and people back to work if you put more money in the real people's pockets? Because we're going to spend it to pay our bills, to meet our needs, to improve the quality of our lives. We don't have small fortunes to sit on. My opinion, the whole Bush tax cut was wrong. Just philosophically, economically, just backward. If you wanted to increase economic economy, you want to make the rich richer, let us buy more stuff. They can produce it, they'll make more money. They're going to get rich. And, but by letting them just sit on money doesn't do anybody any good. I mean, that's...
Yeah, and again, you raise good questions. How is it that you would visualize putting that money into your pockets?
Tax cut.
Tax cut. And again, so again, the voice says tax cuts create jobs. So I agree 100% that we should be lowering everyone's taxes. But if you tax the rich and don't tax anybody else, we'll guarantee you your job production drops to zero. These are the people that create jobs. The poor, when my dad was growing up, he created no jobs. When I borrowed the money and bought a small company, my wife and I went into debt up to here. We bought a small company with 4 people, and one job at a time. We bought another piece of equipment, put people to work. We ended up over 14 years creating 50 jobs. That's the way that our system is a capitalist economy. For our system to grow requires capital. You cannot The stimulus bill from 2 years ago did nothing. It created no jobs. It took $1 trillion, added it to here, which put us out of balance, made us start printing money. It took $1 trillion and put to here, and then it's all dissipated, and you've seen no job growth. You've seen a basically 8 to 9% unemployment, really steady right there. Now, in contrast, when we gave the tax cuts of 2003, the Bush tax cuts, we were sitting at 1.25% rate of growth. Our economy was at 1.25%, which it basically is now. The job growth was about 1.25%. Within 30 days, 30 days, the economy jumped to 8.75%. Boom! The lid flew off, the jobs began to come, and we created 7 million jobs. When that began to percolate down was the collapse of Wall Street, because they were doing things they should not have been doing. And when we bailed out Wall Street, we gave that money to them, which I voted against. It was Nancy Pelosi passed it through the House, but George Bush signed it. I disagreed with both of them. I voted against it because I don't think the government should ever bail out business. That makes us not a capitalist system, makes us not a free enterprise. And when we did that, then the brakes went on, people began to lay off. That whole disruption began. But this is the underlying weakness, and these questions are the ones that we're actually debating in Congress. And so this is a very healthy discussion that we're having today. How do we go about this? My belief is the only thing we can do is create jobs, bring back those manufacturers who left. They left over tax policy, and they left over regulatory policy. They would come back today if we offered reasonable vote. And again, President Obama, you've heard him, if you've listened since January, saying regulations need to be tapered back a bit, and we need to cut the corporate tax rate, because we're so high compared to the rest of the world. We're almost triple compared to much of the world. So anyway, those are the things that people are saying. Other questions? And I'll come to you a second timer. I'll get back to you. Just your second timer. Everybody on the second time lives. Your first timer.
My first time. This is totally off the subject of budget, but what about the Obama health care arrangement? How do you feel like that's going, and what are we going to look for?
Basically, what was going on there is a government takeover of health care. And the government doesn't run business right. It doesn't run any business right. If it could run business right, let it prove it with the post office first. And when we really get that nice and solid, maybe we can expand in.
Or Social Security.
Yeah. So the government takeover of health care has caused great instability here. The fastest growing job market here that should be putting people to work is in health care. Got a lot of baby boomers moving into retirement. Retirees are very expensive for the health care system, and so we should be seeing explosion there. But all the health care companies, the uncertainty, the regulations create uncertainty, and that uncertainty is causing the companies that would normally be expanding here to say, you know, I don't know, we're going to wait and see. That's pretty uncertain. We don't know how it's going to happen. So the health care bill has frozen the job market there, but it's also causing unemployment other places. When I drive around Las Cruces, for instance, I bump into small restaurants. They tell me that they're going to lay off 13 full-time employees, 14 to where they get below the cap, and they don't have to do whatever is required under the health care bill. So again, our regulation is causing a lowering. Every person laid off pays no taxes, and they get food stamps, Medicare, welfare, whatever. So you see where we're making the gap bigger by regulations. I think that many things need to be done to the healthcare system. I don't agree with what that bill did. There are pieces of it, but I voted for the repeal, but I also began to vote for the replacement pieces that would stick in its place. And the exchange really is one of the good things that would come out of it, and I think most Republicans would support shopping across state lines, association health plans where businesses could join together. In other words, there's a list of probably 15 things that we could do to make health care more affordable. But that repeal is, frankly, the Senate's not going to pass it, so there's still about 800 tax increases to middle-class families in the health care bill. And it's causing people to not have the money to spend out in retail areas. And so we've got ourselves in a very big bind right here. Plus, it adds about 1 to 2 trillion over here. Early this year, you were hearing last year that it was going to be budget neutral. And the White House began to say early this year that it could be